some years ago, I was asked to address a breakout session in NRC's annual regulatory information conference. And it occurred to me that I needed to explain that when I graduated from college and I received my Bachelor of Arts degree in Fine Art, my mother accosted the chairman of the art department and said, "So, can he teach with this?"
Not so much.
He said, no teaching credits. And she said, "Well, could he go into commercial art?" He said, "No, we didn't do commercial art, no." Anyway, so I explained to a couple hundred nuclear engineers and executives and regulators, this today is what my art degree prepared me for. My mother would be so happy with it. Yes, sir. So this is going to be very extemporaneous. It should not be a surprise to people who heard me speak before. The topic here in the flyer here is why are we here? Well, we're here because nuclear power is unique among the industrial polluters in that its primary pollution consists of radioactive contaminants. They are at once carcinogenic, mutagenic, teratogenic. That is, they cause cancers, cancers, genetic defects, and birth defects. And not only in the human species, but throughout the biotic community. The release of radioactive contaminants into the open environment is an assault on life wherever it's found. When this planet was very young, it was altogether too radioactive to permit the emergence of mammals and eventually humans. Only as it began to cool off radiologically, only as those elements began to decay, were warm-blooded species and mammals and eventually human beings able to emerge. We are probably the most radio-sensitive creatures on the planet. Our genetic makeup is a large and complex target for ionizing radiation, and that renders us particularly susceptible, especially when our cells are rapidly multiplying as we are a fetus and then as an infant. And so they are the ones that are most vulnerable. I think that there may have been a time, this is my own personal poetic take on things, the artist's take, but I do think that there may have been a time in the way back in the primordial era when human beings were capable of detecting ionizing radiation even as we are now capable of detecting sound waves or light waves. But as that background became less and less radioactive, I think maybe become less and less sensitive. And so now we can't smell it, hear it, see it, taste it, touch it. But almost universally, we don't like it. Almost universally, we have a reaction of repugnance. I personally believe that this intuitive aversion to ionizing radiation is not a defect of our intellect. It is a survival mechanism left over from the days of our dawning on this planet. And I do think that that, rather than the textbooks, should inform our research into ionizing radiation. Here, in this community, we've seen the shutdown of a full-size nuclear station, 600 some megawatts electric, which each day would produce enough radiotoxins to wipe out life on the Earth. That's the radical statement. That's the extreme statement, but that's the true statement. However many ounces of plutonium, how many ever pounds of fission products, were it introduced into the biosphere, into living creatures, would mean the end of them. And not, by the way, a graceful quick end, but a very slow, laborious tearing down of the living fabric. So that's why we're here. I hope that answer your question? Yeah. Because if we don't do something to ensure that the cleanup of this site is the best that it can possibly be, nobody else will. Nobody else will. They don't have the incentive. They don't have the information. They don't have the moral weapons to bring to bear. And so unless we do something, something will not happen, and the site will be left a contaminated site, much worse than it needs to be. And the contaminants, and I said this last year, the contaminants are the full range of reactor-produced radioactive materials. They are no different when you stretch them out and you say, this is the set, these are the salt and peppers over here, here's the creamer, here's the saucer, here's, this is the set of radioactive contaminants. Is no different than those contaminants that presently offend life at Chernobyl or at Fukushima. Same. It is the same material. It is not as dense, not as concentrated, but nonetheless, each one, as it comes in contact with light, offends in the same way. And that's what we have to deal with. That's why we have to make sure that what we leave here, our bequest to future generations of all living things, is as clean as we can possibly make it. Remedy the damage that has been done to the greatest extent possible. It's important. I'll close this gloomy portion of the evening with a quote from Carl Z. Morgan. Carl Z. Morgan was a radiation researcher, and he is the father of the discipline of health physics, which is the discipline of radiation protection in the United States, founder of the American Health Physics Society. And he said to one of his students, "Boy, I'll tell you how important this is. One photon can kill you. One emission from a beta emitter, strontium 90 or whatever." I think Morgan was trying to say we should not get into playing statistical games. It is not about how many chances in 1,000 or chances in 100, or whether this dose compares to a high altitude plane ride across the United States, or a dental x-ray, or whatever it may be. This dose, however small, wherever it is an anti-life projectile. Simple as that. So we need to take that seriously, I think. Anyway, that's the why we're here. Okay. So, look, there's a question.
Questions?
A
Can
comment.
you, in a few words, Ray, sum up what you did in St. Petersburg, what the theme of the meeting was?
Fess up.
And how many people were there? I'm just curious to know how big the gathering was.
Yeah. So I just got back from St. Petersburg. I just got back from St. Petersburg, Russia, where I presented at an international conference on decommissioning. It was sponsored by a brand new limited liability corporation called Decommission LLC. Very nice style, as Russians have. And it was attended by legislators, Russian legislators, by Russian scientists who had been involved in nuclear waste studies and in decommissioning studies. Some who had been to the U.S. to study under National Academies of Science purview, and lead engineers from the Ignalina nuclear plant in Lithuania, which is undergoing decommissioning. That's a RBMK style reactor, which, as you all know, is the Chernobyl style of reactor, which is moderated with graphite. The core of this reactor is packed with monster blocks of graphite, and it's cooled with water. At the end of the day, the graphite becomes irradiated, contaminated, there's a difference, and really nasty to handle, and there's tons of it. So their decommissioning is a little more complicated than ours. So those guys were there, and there were officials of Rosatom, which is now a stockholder corporation. It used to be the sole state monopoly nuclear company of Russia. Now it's the sole privately held state monopoly nuclear company of Russia. So yeah, so we had those folks there. I went in tandem with an old friend of mine who also presented. He's the past president of Maine Yankee Atomic Power Company. He was my principal sparring partner when it came to negotiating the decommissioning of Maine Yankee. And that, we should mention as a side note, was a plant that was decommissioned on time, on budget, below budget for radiation exposure to the workers, and to probably the cleanest of cleanup standards of any plant to that point in the country. And all of that, most of it, was negotiated with members of the community and also Samoa. Meisner and I did side-by-side presentations, and what we presented on was the importance of community involvement in nuclear power plant decommissioning and its benefits to the community, to the decommissioning company, and to regulators. And I was surprised at times when Mike Meisner, a lifetime nuclear supporter, told the Rosatom officials, I was begging him, please, Mike, don't point the finger at him. He was doing it. He said, I want Rosatom to understand, if you people are going to try to sell nuclear power plants around the world, that even though it may not play well in Russia, out there in the world, it's the coming thing, you're going to have to get used to community input and community involvement. Take my word for it. Yeah, so that was our fun adventure in Russia.
How many people attended, right?
We had about 40 at peak. We had an incident in the middle of it was a 3-day thing, and we had an incident in the middle of it in which these guys burst into the room. The two doors blew open. Big guys came in uniform. Russian security police, everybody stay seated, and they hauled off one of our speakers, dragged him off from the front of the room, and one of our attorneys went with him. He was released about 4 or 5 hours later. He's had some visa irregularity. But the activists in the room said, well, that's Russia for you. They said they just wanted to let us know that they were really in charge and they could do whatever they wanted. That was the message. So that was fun. These people are very brave and very strong. The leader of this group that invited us was beaten walking home from a meeting, clubbed, waylaid with pipes so badly that he spent 26 days in the hospital. The group itself managed to wangle funding from the U.S. State Department for some of the adventures we've been on, including this one. My airfare was paid through a Hayes Fulbright grant from the U.S. State Department. And when officialdom found out about that, they took away their nonprofit status, billed them for all the benefits they had ever gotten, some $50,000 worth, and had them declared as registered foreign agents. So, these people are not, they're not gonna walk out of here and go down on Main Street and be relaxed and, you know, have a beer and no worries. They face a far different atmosphere than we face. Nobody should ever be afraid to speak up about nuclear power in the United States. Believe me, nothing is going to befall you.